Oh, drat these computers. They're so naughty and so complex. I could pinch them.
What's up, everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about WordPress. But before we get into the story, I want to share some information about WordPress security and vulnerabilities in case you don't already know. Now, first off, overall, Google blacklists roughly 70,000 websites due to security issues every single week. 84% of all security vulnerabilities on the internet are the result of cross-site scripting, otherwise known as XSS attacks. Now here's WordPress. There are roughly 22,000 core software vulnerabilities in total tracked by WPScan database for WordPress. Hosting platforms are responsible for 41% of all WordPress attacks. 61% of infected WordPress websites were out of date, resulting in 44% of hacking being against outdated WordPress websites. 52% of WordPress vulnerabilities relate to WordPress plugins, while themes account for 11%. So if you add those together, you have 63%, leaving 37% outstanding, which you could say it's all based on the core, but if you look at weak passwords, they contribute to 8% of website hackings, which brings you down to 29%. 3% of over 55,000 plugins on the WordPress directory have never been updated. Now, this is one of the main causes of vulnerabilities. Now, years ago, I downloaded all of the plugins and all of the themes, all of the versions that were there, and I ran a bunch of scans against them, this, that, and the other. And I came up also with 55,000 plugins, roughly 55,000 plugins, and there are 25,000 themes. So you have a total of 75,000 packages that are mixed and matched and put together to create a WordPress website, which, if you look at the 52% of WordPress vulnerabilities being related to plugins and 11% being related to themes, you have a wide array of possibilities for attackers to attack millions of sites on the internet.
Say, pardon me, but could you help out a fellow American who's down on his luck?
Hit the road!
Let's jump now into the story. 2 vulnerabilities have been found in the Gutenberg template library and Redux framework plugin for WordPress, which is installed on more than 1 million websites. They can allow arbitrary plugin installation, they can post deletions, and they can give access to potentially sensitive information about a site's configuration. The plugin from the developer Redux.io offers various templates and building blocks for creating web pages within WordPress's Gutenberg editor. So, kind of think about, what you see is what you get editors or drag and drop to build your web page in terms of modules. It's a great feature, it's a great function, but with it comes vulnerabilities. Now, the first bug, CVE 2021-38312, rates a 7.1 out of 10 on the CVSS scale, making it high severity. It arises from the plugin's use of the WordPress REST API, which processes requests to install and manage blocks. It fails to authorize permissions correctly, and that is according to Wordfence, who came out with the report. While the REST API endpoints registered under the Redux/v1/templates REST root used a permission callback, so they are trying to check for permissions, they want to verify users' permissions, this callback only checked whether or not the user sending the request had edit posts capability. So their check on the permissions is only checking to see whether or not the user has the ability to edit posts. But this particular API can also be used to install, as it said, I read earlier, blocks or plugins and interact with content. So if you're only checking for the edit function, but you're giving them permissions to do everything else, that's a bad thing. Now, that means that users with lower permissions, such as contributors and authors, could install any plugin in the WordPress repository via the Redux version 1 templates plugin install endpoint, researchers said, or they could use the Redux version 1 templates delete saved block endpoint to erase posts. There's the bad news. The second, medium severity vulnerability, CVE 2021-38314, rates a 5.3 on the CVSS scale. It exists because the Gutenberg template library and Redux framework plugin registers several AJAX actions available to unauthenticated users, one of which is deterministic and predictable, making it possible to uncover what the support hash for a site would be. This support hash eject action, which was also available to unauthenticated users, called the support args function in Redux core, inc, classes, class Redux helpers, PHP, which returned potentially sensitive information such as the PHP version, active plugins on the site, and their versions, and an unsalted MD5 hash of the site's auth key and secure auth key, according to Wordfence. Now, researchers added that an attacker could use the information to plan a website takeover using other vulnerable plugins. Now, Redux.io has issued a patch in version 4.2.13. These are only the latest WordPress plugin vulnerabilities to come to light. Other notable vulnerabilities this year include: in January, researchers warned of 2 vulnerabilities, one critical in a WordPress plugin called OrbitFox that could allow attackers to inject malicious code into vulnerable websites and or take control of a website. Also in January, a plugin called Pop-Up Builder, used by WordPress websites for building pop-up ads for newsletter subscriptions, was found to have a vulnerability that could be exploited by attackers to send out newsletters with custom content or to delete or import newsletter subscribers. Then in February, an unpatched, stored cross-site scripting, now you remember I mentioned it was something like 84% of all attacks, cross-site scripting security bug was found to potentially affect 50,000 Contact Form 7 style plugin users. Then in March, the Plus add-ons for Elementor plugin for WordPress was discovered to contain a critical security vulnerability that attackers can exploit to quickly, easily, and remotely take over a website. First reported as a 0-day bug, researchers said that it was being actively attacked in the wild. Then in May, a SQL injection vulnerability discovered in a WordPress plugin called Spam Protection Anti-Spam Firewall by CleanTalk. It could expose user emails, passwords, credit card data, and other sensitive information to an unauthenticated attacker. Then in July, a critical cross-site scripting bug that affects WordPress sites running the front-end file manager plugin was found. It allows remote unauthenticated users to inject JavaScript code into vulnerable websites to create admin user accounts. Now, I know that some companies choose WordPress because they think it's quick and easy to slap some kind of website together. Or maybe the budget is too low for a larger system or more in-depth system, but this is definitely short-sighted. To me, the sheer volume of vulnerabilities and the continuous uncovering of new vulnerabilities in major plugins forces me to simply not use it or recommend it to any clients or accept any projects that have it as a requirement. I don't take over any WordPress websites. The maintenance, the security, and other stuff that goes into a project like this is just far too much, and there's way too much overhead, and inevitably the client is unwilling to pay for that overhead.
You mean old dragon. I'm gonna slay you.
Now, before you try to roast me, yeah, I know about Wordfence and other security plugins and some things you can do on the server, but you cannot leave security of a core system or major plugins that are used out there in the wild. You can't leave that security up to some external source. The WordPress organization needs to change how they do things. They need to force plugin developers to put in more time and effort to regularly update their work, or they should threaten them to remove their plugin. WordPress, and all systems for that matter, they need to implement more stringent plugin acceptance criteria with regular checkups and tests run against these plugins to make sure the users, the people who rely on WordPress or rely on the system like Drupal, Joomla, Typo.ai, whatever, that the people who rely on that can sleep at night or stay as secure as possible without having to then go out and pay for Wordfence or this, that, and the other thing. That's not the answer going forward. The answer going forward is that these organizations take more control over their baby and make sure that anybody who's docking onto their baby is following the same principles and same security steps that the parent or the organization is. With that, thanks for watching. Don't forget to share. And if you haven't already, subscribe. And if you haven't already, smash the bell to be updated when I upload my next episode. Okay, take care. See you on the next episode.